Hi guys, this is Nick Christopher from Mob Tales. Thank you for coming on the show. Please like, share, and most of all, subscribe. Today I have a very special guest, fellow mob author and historian, good guy, very smart, knows his shit. Chris Cipollini, thank you for coming on, my friend.
Nick, thank you for having me on. This is my first time with you. I'm excited.
Yeah, it should be fun. You look good. Nice little backdrop there.
Yeah, thank you. I know, right?
No, it's all good. It's nice. It's all good. You're in California now, right?
Yeah. East Coast boy in Northern California now. It's still a little bit of a culture shock.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah,
But you're not from there. You're originally from PA.
you're right. Pittsburgh.
Right, Pittsburgh, that's correct. Okay, yeah, so the idea, I would say it's a culture shock. Okay.
Yeah, a little bit, little bit.
A little bit.
Yeah.
All right, so I'm going to just first tell the audience a little bit more about you so people have an idea. And then I'm going to shoot some questions at you. And we'll go like from there. Um,
Sure.
Christian Cipollini is a well-known mob author, historian, knows a lot about the genre, grew up around it, especially in Pittsburgh of all places.
Mm.
PA was big time with a lot of wise guys in Pittsburgh, South Philly, so forth and so on. So what I want to ask you, Chris, first of all, is what motivated you to, like myself, get involved in in knowing about this kind of genre and about this kind of history in America and the world in general. What motivated you to get interested in this kind of thing?
Nick, I always say this was a slow burning process. I knew at a young age there were a lot of things I wasn't good at, but I was pretty good at writing. I had no idea that I would end up in nonfiction true crime. At the time, I actually thought I'd be like a fiction writer. And it just turns out over time, the influences were coming in. My father was a narcotics cop with the Pennsylvania State Police, and though he tried to insulate me and my sister from a lot of it, the weird thing is he had a fascination for history, and he loved mob movies. I don't know. I mean, he took me to see Scarface in 1983. Like, that's the kind of thing. He loved it, even though he didn't personally deal with the mob a lot. He dealt with organized crime, but more like the motorcycle clubs, things like that.
Mhm.
So, but it was there. And as time goes on, not to drag the story out, I I would read books and books. I love books. And I, the day a friend of mine and I picked up a newspaper in a library from the New York Times, and who was on it but this well-dressed guy named John Gotti. And we were young and like, wow, this is a real gangster. Like, he dresses so nice. We were like, I don't want to glorify it, but honestly, I mean, we were like drawn to that.
No, you're not the only one.
Yeah, as I found out, because then I started studying this and realizing and talking to my dad a little bit. It's like, oh wait, this is a part of not just pop culture. This is part of the fabric of our nation, whether we like it or not. It's part of it. So that made me want to pick up all the books and materials I could on the subject matter, jump ahead, life, kids, all those things. I went back to college because I was a dropout the first time. Like, I'm not your like, oh, everything came together. It was a slow burn. But then I found my niche, Nick. That I was like, that's what I was meant to do, is find the needle in the haystack of particularly organized crime.
Right. Yeah, sort of. But you were never, but you never dealt in that world. Meaning, like me, I was in a street gang when I was a kid, and so I was
Right.
drawn to it differently. I was around these guys, and
Yeah, well,
you know,
yeah,
were you
that's
affected by that? Did you ever come close to that at all?
yeah, yeah. See, that's the other crazy part. You grow up with this one element, but yet, um, where I lived outside Pittsburgh, um, a few blocks over was an entirely different school district and a little mini city, I guess. And I had friends from there, and that's where I experienced like, whoa, this is all the Italians and the black guys, and I would hang out with them, and you realize some of their dads like always had the cigars and would go into these storefronts that really nobody shopped in, and you're like, what are they doing there? It was that kind of thing, and
Mhm.
everybody knew it was, it's like the open secret.
Yeah.
In Pittsburgh, we would take trips downtown to the seedy areas, and you'd be like going to certain establishments, and you'd be like, whoa, this is what it is. So yeah, but back to my earlier point, I didn't realize I was actually around stuff. I just did, like, I took it as, okay, I'm just hanging out with my friends and this is another part of the world. I didn't put it all together. Just call me naive or whatever. And then as years go on, I'm like, holy shit. I'm like, I knew guys that, my friends would be like, yeah, that dude, he did this. And I'm like, oh my God. So yeah, and the ironic thing is, Nick, I'll just throw this in.
Yeah.
Now, my dad's side, the Italian part, we have not found mob connections that anybody's admitted to or aware of, but it's really ironic that my mother's side, and she was Scotch, Great Britain, her family from Connecticut used to rent out properties to, is what she called, guys in suits with cigars who would come and hang out with my dad and my uncles all the time. She didn't realize till later those were the Connecticut mob guys. Bridgeport would hang out with. So it was this weird influences that came into my life, and I think it was all pointing me like, yeah, you belong in this genre. You may not have been in the mob, but yeah,
Oh, that's funny. Like you weren't
yeah,
aware of it, but here he comes like a wake-up call, kind of a.
yeah,
Yeah, that's interesting. Um, you're you wrote a couple of books, and one of them I did actually. One of them I got. Actually, two of them I got. I think. One of them was Lucky Luciano, which was the animated version, which is pretty, the cartoon one, which is pretty cool.
right.
I see it. I think that Lucky was one of your more interested, one of the characters I think you were most interested in, if I'm correct.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes,
Is there any particular, even though he's like played out, like forget about it,
right.
so many different ways, what drew you to Lucky so much?
Uh, I'll say this. What drew me to all of it, and I'll get to the lucky part, is a good point you bring up. Is everything's played out. We see what we're shown and we're told what we're told and we rehash it. But that's where it's like history repeats itself unless you get it right. I realized even wise guys, Jewish, Italian, black, gangsters, whatever, they're multidimensional like us. We're all layered. I kind of was drawn into that. Like, wait, let me get deeper. And I want to know, what was Lucky really like? Having not been there, he's been dead since before I was born, but try to paint this picture from an objective standpoint as much as you possibly can be objective. Like what we call black and white villain hero. There is no such thing. There's a gray middle ground. And Luciano himself, the reason I got drawn into him, we all know Capone, Gotti, Escobar, El Chapo, and believe me, I'm fascinated by all of it. The poster boys. Luciano was too, but I felt like, well, not as many people know. If you say Al Capone, there isn't a person under any rock that doesn't know who that is.
Right.
Luciano, not so much. And more importantly, when I picked up a copy of the 1975 Last Testament of Lucky Luciano, right? It's a great read. I recommend everybody read it, but also know, as I found out a few years later, it's largely considered bunk, at least a good portion of it.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what you want. The short answer, that then made me want to find out as much as I could from everybody that came before me with the technology we had at the new millennium. Who was this guy? And really, what did it matter in American culture, society, economics?
Well, based on Lucky, and I'm sure you've seen this. I'm sure you've seen this. I'm sure in Bulwark Empire they had a character played Lucky, and I'm sure you've seen it.
Right.
From Father. What was your opinion on how he played his character?
That's a really good question. And I try to be objective here too. Now, as a crime historian, I know me and Hollywood, and we have danced the dance. I'm a purist. Like, you don't have to do a creative arc. It's crazy enough. Okay. That aside, I digress. I think, and I'm sorry, I cannot remember his name right now, the actor.
Yeah, I
Uh,
mean, he's great.
yeah, I thought he did a really good job. And you do have to take these shows and things, almost compartmentalize them. Did those people play the role of Meyer Lansky and Lucky Luciano well? Yes, they did. Was there a lot of creative license taken by the writers, producers, direct? Yes, of course, and that is part of Hollywood. I'm
Know
not even
about it a
bashing.
lot.
Yeah, but did he do a good job? Yeah, yeah, yeah. I do think he did, and it's tough to play Luciano. I'm not. I love Al too, but it's, in my opinion, it might be easier to find actors to convincingly play Capone versus Luciano, and I don't know why, but it's just me personally. It was like, it's really hard to nail him.
I think Luciano was more of a complex character than Al Capone.
Yeah,
Al Capone's just like tough guy, ghetto tough guy. He's not hard to play. The guy I think that played Luciano pretty good was in a movie called, oh my God, I can't remember the title right now, but it's very old, way back.
yeah, from like '73. You talking about the one with the Italian guy that played him,
Michael
and
Nouri.
yeah,
Michael Nouri, I think, nailed it.
yeah, yeah. That, God, I have to go back and revisit that one. It's been done. There have been actors, even in some crappy overall, that kind of got it. And I'm glad you brought that up, because it makes me really reflect on why Luciano, because he is complex and there are so many nuances. And I'm talking about even superficial things. Now, you probably know from the comic book and the book I wrote
Hmm.
that he had tattoos, and people are like, oh wow, but okay, why does that matter? Because in 1936, not that many people truly had. I have tattoos, it's common now, but back then. And why did nobody know he had them? Because of the time period. He was trying to be your upstanding citizen. You don't show you got tattoos when you were, 13 years old, of a naked girl on your arm. You don't show that. You cover that. I think that tells us so much about his personality, the time period, what he was trying to project
Hmm.
versus what, and every gangster's projecting something.
Right. Well, just like AR. AR, the same thing. AR was trying to be an upstanding citizen.
Right,
Uh,
right,
he was a gambling fanatic, and
right.
he was nuts. Gambling for 14 hours. I mean, that's insane. But he was a Looney Tune. That guy, smart, brilliant.
Yeah, that's what you call eccentric. That guy could foresee financial windfalls and used those young guys back then to do it. And yet himself, he was arguably a degenerate gambler, that ended up accidentally, probably not intentionally, but getting shot
Yeah.
over of gambling debt.
But outside of books, you've also been involved in film. Um, United Stuff of America was something you did like 2015, I think it was.
Yeah, shot that in Manhattan. That was fun. Yeah, that was like the second show I ever was on, I think. Yeah, I believe that was like the second one I ever did.
Yeah, the other one you did was Drugs Inc. in 20.
Yeah, that one was interesting because I wasn't that was one where they brought me on to consult. And I have to tell the story because it's funny, you'll appreciate this. It's not exactly something you can put on your resume. I was asked to find drug dealers who were willing to go on camera. And wouldn't you know, within 2 weeks, I reached out to a few friends and suddenly the producers had a couple drug dealers willing to go on camera. It
Oh.
was just, how do you put that on your LinkedIn profile?
That is interesting. Now,
Yeah.
these guys were Colombian, Mexican.
No, the episode I did, that was like back in 2015. That was for New Orleans Mardi Gras.
Oh,
And they came to me, and I've never, not to any extensive have I written about New Orleans, but I happen to know a guy from Detroit who was living in Shreveport and called him, and it was one of those kind of things.
I
So,
got you. I
yeah.
got you. Okay, that's cool. Um, and then you did another one called Crazy Train, I think it's called.
Oh, that's one of the podcast. Yeah, that's a podcast with my good friend Jasmine St. Clair. Anybody who's familiar with the 1990s shock elements, she was a guest a lot of times on Jerry Springer, but she does a podcast. I've been on that. We're friends. Yeah, I've probably done, oh, I don't know, since 2014, a dozen shows since then, because over time, back to your first question, you write a few books, you kind of find your niche, and then TV shows, because they're so big, these true crime shows, they seek out people who kind of have a knowledge of certain areas. And here's the thing, we all stay in our lane to, we know our role, but you know how this works. We all, me, you, everybody, we all stay in touch and help each other out. Like, hey, a show called me. I know a guy that might be able to help you out. It's on the Greek mafia. I can get you Nick, like that kind of thing. So I'm really grateful. I just wanted to throw that out there, that I appreciate everybody. And we pay it forward, but your stuff, and they come and they bring you on, and generally take pretty good care of you. It's
Cool.
fun. I like the TV part. Yeah.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, right.
Well, since your last project, since your last book that you came out, what are you working on currently, writing wise, that you may be putting out soon?
Well, the first thing that I don't have a date, so I'm just going to throw that out there, but some of my followers and friends know Seth Ferranti and I, with Scott Bernstein and a few other amazing people, produced a documentary called Dope Men, America's First Drug Cartel. I'm not sure where or how we're going to release it. It's pretty much done. And it tells the story of like AR, Lucky, Capone, all the guys that were in Legs Diamond, all these guys that really formed the first international drug trafficking that nobody talks about. That whole, oh, the mob doesn't deal drugs. Oh, believe me, in 1919, Arnold Rothstein figured out, oh, yes, we can, and used those guys to do it. That documentary is my baby, and we're going to put out soon. But as for books, the comic book you have, I have my book on Lucky, but I also did a comic book series to kind of complement it. The graphic novel, which is all the issues, plus it's like the director's cut, original art, the true stories of the characters, all that. We're waiting on a release date. We were trying to Kickstarter, but it really didn't get much traction. We're still going to release it, and I'm really excited because I think people are going to dig it. Last thing, I got the memoirs of drug cartel hitman El Mano Negra.
Oh,
Um,
Mano yes, I never heard of him.
yes, well, finally 5 years in the making, and people who know and have heard me talking about this are probably like, God, is he ever going to put that out? I just, I just did the deal with Seth's publishing company. I think it's safe that I say it because we signed it, but I'm going to release it through that. So it's basically this dude through his lens of almost 40 years of domestically working for the cartels here, and my work in trying to corroborate and figure out what's what and all of that. But I think it's interesting because it's through his, it's almost like a diary.
Mhm.
And just to see that, like, I didn't want to rewrite in cold blood, like everybody's true crime book follows the same scenario, we all do, but this one I was like, wow, I don't think I'm going to mess with it much. I'll put in my part, beginning, middle, end, and let his words go, because it's some crazy shit, to say the least.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah.
Well, based on that idea, currently right now in America, of course, organized crime is like, well, the mafia in general is not what it used to be. I'm sure you agree.
Right, right.
Now, would you say that, not that they're gone, they're still around, but would you say that the Mexican cartels are the new so-called threat, mafia threat of the world of America currently, compared to any other ethnic group, like let's say the Russians, Albanians, or whatever, which I don't think they're any. I don't think they're even near the same as threat as, let's say, the Mexican cartel. I don't think even the Colombians are that much of a threat anymore. But what is your take on it?
My take is this: as a history buff, Roman Empire, Greek Empire, every empire has the ebb and flow. And when you go to the top, there's always someone eventually. It may be 100 years, 1,000 years, but it's going to happen. The Italian American mafia will forever exist. In what capacity is debatable, because it's part of the fabric now,
Mhm.
as are other ones. But who is the top dog? That is the Mexican cartel
Mhm.
overall. They are. And yes, as for um, the Colombians needed them to get here when we, the whole, I'm not going to go through the whole history, but when we stopped the Caribbean, the ball was in their court, and and again, I'm not glorifying something. I'm just saying, realistically, this problem, like any dominant criminal group in a little enclave or nationally, is because of lots of factors and variables. Who's
Mhm.
going to be on top? And there always will be. There'll be all Albanians. There are still some Jewish gangsters, even though, arguably a lot assimilated out, way back after the heyday of Vegas. They just, not everybody wants to stay a gangster. Some want to get into high society. But Mexico, to answer your question, yeah, they rule the world when it comes to the singular vice that the world is never going to stop as hard as they try, because people still want that vice. That's the one they want. And guess what? It's consumable, which means it's renewable. They just make more.
Yeah.
that's my take on it. We could sit and argue with a DEA agent over here, a doctor over here, a gangster over here. My view is very centric. I think everybody is to blame, including ourselves. But they're the Italian mafia, back to the original thing, they're always going to be a part of and that there's still there's guys I know that, well, okay, maybe it's not as a John Gotti out there, but you even look, we had Merlino a few years ago in Philly. He was still like, geez, there's still guys that are the poster boy.
Right. Well, the Canadians in Montreal, they're still shooting each other up there.
Well, right. It gets, that's it. And here's and this is something too, but in order to survive and adapt and evolve, you also have to make connections. And now we're hearing like the Drangheta, and this is it. They've made deals with the Sinaloans, and that's how they're surviving over there. You almost have to. I'm not trying to write a book on how to be a drug lord or a mob boss, but it's not that much different than in corporate America. There's a lot of fascinating and creepy shit that goes on.
Yeah, I could imagine. Yes, for sure. Especially Sinaloans.
Yeah.
They're nuts.
Yeah, and they're not even, and it's funny about them too, when you talk to some of the guys I know that are like associated, as we would say with the mob guy. Yeah, I'm an associate, I'm a friend, he's a friend of ours, or he's a friend of mine. Those guys will tell you that they have their own views of the other cartels. Like, it's literally like, talk to someone who's Sinaloan blood, what they think of the Los Zetas. And it's like, oh wow, they really hate each other, and they'll talk so much smack, but it's no different than how we would on a street corner talking about, whatever group on the street.
Well, look, Sicilians and Napolitans.
Right.
They hated each other for the same country, the same
Right,
place.
right, exactly.
Yeah.
It's a culture thing. I mean, and I think that's why I'm so fascinated by all this. And I hope anybody who gets anything out of all this, yes, I hope it's entertaining and exciting, and you're like, wow, but also this shit's for real, and we're a part of it, whether we want to be or not. Just like in Pittsburgh, I didn't even realize how much I was a part of the Pittsburgh thing that was going on growing up, because it's almost like peripheral. You're just there in it.
Yeah, I understand. No, like I said, they used to come in my dad's cafe. I mean, right in front of my face.
You're right, right.
I
It's
mean,
just,
I
that's day
figured
to
it
day.
out. I figured it out because it was somewhat obvious.
Yeah.
How my dad treated them, how they took a table in the back and nobody sat next to them. Like, why is nobody sitting next to them? My father goes, "Don't worry about it."
Yeah, right. That's always the answer too. Yeah, just don't worry about it. I know I got that sometimes too. Yeah, don't worry about who that is. Yeah.
Well, Chris, listen, it's been more than a pleasure having you on. I love your work, and I wish you luck and everything. And who knows, maybe one day we'll do something together.
I hope
Also,
so.
I'm wondering, have you ever come across, I mean, my people anyway, the Greek mob? I'm not, because they were prevalent in Philly. So I wonder if you ever came across that at all.
No, I personally haven't. But I'm aware of that. And even though Philly and Pittsburgh largely considered themselves as if they were in different states, like there's that thing. In Pittsburgh, we also had some Greek influence, including in the mob. And I'm not just all the Greeks were in the mob, but no, there was elements of them within, um, associated with the LaRocca group of Pittsburgh. So, but personally, no. Actually, what I found fascinating when you and I first met years ago through,
Yeah.
publishing all that, it was that, like, oh wow, my first Greek guy that was because that's the other thing that makes this fun for us, is you think you've seen it all or met every type, and then like that, it's wow, somebody else that you didn't even realize. That's what keeps it exciting.
Yes, that's for sure. Well, again, Chris, look, thank you very much. I appreciate you coming on, and we'll definitely stay in touch like we always do. And I wish you luck on everything else you do in the future.
Thanks. Thank you for having me on, everybody.
Now, if anybody wanted to reach out to you, like where would they, how could they touch base with you, the website or anything like that?
I'm rebuilding my website. And for those of you that already were following me on Instagram, that's my main place. Instagram suspended my ass. Still not sure why, but it had something to do with the crime post. So I started a new one, Gangland Legend Part 2. If you want to follow me on Instagram,
Okay.
Twitter's Gangland Legend. And Facebook, it's just me.
Yeah.
So yeah, um, that's where Instagram and Twitter is where I usually post what I got coming out. If you're interested, and reach out to me, say hello, say you love it, hate it, whatever. We're all open for it.
Okay. Sounds good, brother.
Yeah,
Well,
thanks again.
thank you much, and we'll stay in touch as always.
Definitely. Thanks, Nick.
Take care, brother.